So same thing with the finances. Obviously, you want someone who's knowledgeable, professional, experienced, but they can't know everything. And so that's why a lot of financial experts work in teams. They can work with people that maybe you're working with, like your tax accountant. They can provide resources, find information that maybe you don't have access to. All right. The next one is, well, how do you find a financial advisor? And I think it's really simple. There's 3 ways to do it: referrals, referrals, referrals. So you can, years ago we had, the yellow pages. I think they still make the yellow pages. I don't know. And so you could look online, you could look in the yellow pages, but I think that's a tricky way to go about it. And so I think the same way we found a doctor, the same way we found a good mechanic, is through a referral. And so you guys obviously have a great community, and you do that already, finding people to come and speak or assist, and say, who do you work with? What do you like about this person? But sometimes you can't get a good referral. Sometimes you don't want to rely just on the referral itself. And so sometimes it's a good idea to interview other people. And so let's talk about, if you go and you talk to other financial advisors and, well, what are the differences? What makes one different from another? Well, the first one are fees. Obviously, financial coaches, advisors need to get paid for the work that they do, but they don't all charge the same way. I will tell you, first and foremost, when someone succeeds financially, generally speaking, it has nothing to do with the fact that they had, low cost fees. Obviously, I don't want to pay a lot for things. If I can find a good deal, I want to get a good deal. I don't mind paying, a fair amount for, good value, but we don't want to be overcharged. But fees are important, but it's not the most important thing. But what is important is for you to know, well, how do they get paid? Some advisors, well, actually all advisors get paid annually. Some get paid a lot more than others. In my opinion, there are some fees that are unnecessary, and they're unnecessarily high. It doesn't mean you're getting bad service. It doesn't mean you won't be successful financially. But bottom line is you just want to be able to compare. And so as you're talking to different advisors and finding out how they get paid, it's interesting to find out what one advisor will tell you about how they get paid compared to another. So you learn as you talk to different people, well, how, the information they provide or don't provide is very telling. The products, obviously, if you talk to someone who only sells life insurance, then that's all they're going to talk to you about is life insurance. You want to talk to someone who has access to more solutions, more products, more companies, because everyone's situation is unique. And so you want to find someone that can provide the right product, the right service for your situation, whatever it might be. Experience. Obviously, some people have been in the business longer than others. Just because someone has been around for a long time doesn't mean they're the best at what they're doing. And just because someone's new doesn't mean they're not good at what they do. But obviously, if someone's, it would be helpful to know that someone has been around for a bit, has some experience, and it's good to find out. You just ask people, well, how long have you been in the industry? Some advisors, I mentioned this, are all about products, and some are about strategy. My advice is to work with someone who's about strategy, is about having a game plan. You'll find some people, when you meet with them, they're pushing a product, and they do it even before they know you or your situation. So it becomes obvious that they're not, interested in helping you, the individual. They're interested in pushing a certain product, maybe because they have a quota or something like that. You want to work with someone that provides a strategy. They get to, they educate you, they give you a certain strategy based on your unique situation, and then they can back up that plan with the appropriate products and services. And then some are fiduciaries. I think it'll be hard to find someone who's not a fiduciary these days, But a fiduciary is basically it's a requirement where they have to do what's in the best interest of the client. Now, even before there were fiduciaries, that was always our goal. My goal anyway, was to do what was in the best interest of the client. That should be a given, whether they're a fiduciary or not. But a fiduciary is an official title that that person is obligated, legally obligated to do what's in the best interest of the client. Now, can a fiduciary, can you find someone who's a fiduciary and not be a great financial advisor? Absolutely. And so that's why I think it's good to get good referrals. I think it's good to interview a couple different advisors so you can find, a quality person. Okay, how do I know if I can trust this person with my money? I've never met this person before. How do I know? Well, one of the first things you can do is you can go to broker check. It's brokercheck.finra.org, and you can look up that person. So if that person has gotten in trouble, I mean, people make mistakes, but sometimes they do it on purpose, and they can get in trouble, and doesn't mean they lose their license necessarily, but there'll be a record of it. And so you can go online and see, do they have a clean record or not? I think a lot of people in the industry do have a clean record, but there's some people who don't. And quite frankly, consumers don't know that they can check. And I think it's helpful just to double check. And brokercheck.finra.org is a good way to do that. One thing that's very popular these days, if you're 55 or older, it's very likely you've got an invitation to a steak dinner. Maybe not so much during COVID, but probably pre-COVID and certainly more now. And the idea is come on out, have a dinner on us, and we're going to give you a presentation. There's nothing wrong with that. However, AARP did a study on this. Over 6 million Americans get invitations for these every year. And the AARP, when they reviewed them, they found about 12% were fraud. Now, so the majority are legit, but sometimes people aren't, right? And so it's, as they say, there's no such thing as a free meal. So there's nothing wrong with going to these programs, having a nice meal. It's just they just know some people have a hard time saying no. So once they're there and they have a nice meal and they create a relationship with someone, some individuals have a hard time saying no. And so they know they're going to get a certain percentage to become clients right away. And you just have to, it's okay to get the information, go to these, but just take some time gathering information and maybe, meeting with other financial advisors to compare. So continuing on with, can I trust this person with my money? Okay, so I mentioned referrals. Referrals are obviously, good if you got to trust a referral. But let's say someone was not referred to you, and somehow you met this individual. You can ask them for references. Say, hey, I enjoyed meeting with you. I'd like to learn more about you. Do you have, maybe 3 references you can send me, and I could talk to them, and they can share with me about their experience with you. Go with what your gut. If you meet with someone and you don't have a good feeling, be willing to walk away. If this person seems too pushy, if they're not listening to you, sometimes if you're married, the advisor will only talk to one person and ignore the other. If they talk down to you, if you feel overwhelmed and not empowered by the end of the meeting, that's not good. And so sometimes you just got to go with your gut and say, well, maybe this is not the person I need to work with. I mentioned broker check. You can check that out. Sometimes it's good to find out how long they've been with a particular company. There's nothing wrong with brokers changing companies. They do it all the time. But if you see someone that's changed companies, every couple of years, and they got a list of 10, 12 different companies, that may not be, there might be a bad reason for that. And that may not be the best person to work with. Okay, let's say you're going to meet with someone and you're going to schedule an appointment. How do I prepare for this appointment? So a couple things. The first one is prepare a list of questions. I'm going to give you some questions in a few minutes that you can ask. but there might be more questions that you have, and it's always a good idea to write them down. If I don't put it in my to-do list, it doesn't get done. If it's not on my calendar, I don't go to it, right? And I think it's wise to have it written down so that when you meet with someone, you don't get flustered, and you make sure that you're thorough and you get your questions answered. And as I mentioned, I'm going to give you some questions as well. It is helpful to have statements. Maybe you have some debt, maybe you have investments, maybe you have insurance policies or a budget. It's good to have those handy. You may not bring them out on the first appointment. And you might want to save that for the second or third appointment when you meet with this person. But sometimes it's helpful to have them handy in case you decide, to talk more in detail. You can say, well, here's what I've got. What do you think about this, that, and the other? But eventually, if you decide to work with someone, you're definitely going to need your current information, and statements are a good place to start with that. And then goals. I think writing down goals is a great idea. Sometimes when you don't come prepared and someone asks you, what are your goals? What would you like to do? And you're on the spot, maybe you can't think of it right away. So if you take some time to prepare and think in advance of what are my goals and have them written down, then you can clearly communicate that to this advisor. Okay, so here's some questions to ask a potential advisor. And so I'm going to be sharing this presentation with Terry and Ellie at the end. So you can screenshot this or write this down, but they'll get a copy of this. So, yeah, but the first one is, what do you love about your job? What services do you provide your clients? Sometimes it goes beyond financial coaching. Maybe they're tied to a tax accountant, or they could help with that. Maybe they do budgeting. Maybe they don't. Maybe they help with debt. Maybe they don't. And so it's good to know, well, what do you offer? What is your investment philosophy? I rarely get asked this question. I try and communicate that to my clients. But this is good for you to know. And really, it describes the personality and how this person operates, and it lets you know if that makes you feel comfortable, right? I don't think anyone would say, like, well, I like to take risks. I like to, put all our chips on one thing. I like to go hard and fast, and I don't think anyone would say that. But if they did, and that made you uncomfortable, well, now maybe you shouldn't work with that person. But asking them what their investment philosophy is a good idea. How will we communicate about my investments? Communication is so important. So how often will they be reaching out to you? How often can you reach out to them? How do you get paid? How will you measure and evaluate my investment performance? How do I know if I'm doing good, if I'm on track? And can you tell me where the last 2 clients you lost, aren't working with you? And so everybody has clients that leave, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But no one's ever actually asked me this question before. And I think it's a good question to ask, right? Just to see what they would say. Excuse me. I need to take a drink of water. My office building, they kept the heat on, and it's so warm outside. So now it's like twice as hot in my office. So I think it's really dry in here. Excuse me. All right, so let's say you have a current financial advisor. Here are some good questions to ask for your current advisor. Or I'm sorry, not to ask your advisor, but to ask to yourself about your advisor. So am I happy with my financial advisor communicating with me? Is it often enough? Is it thorough? Is it just a quick phone call? Do we meet in person? Am I happy with that? Does my financial advisor take time to understand my long-term goals? Sometimes it's just about looking where things are today and how we did the last year. And maybe they don't talk about the next year or the next 20 years. And so do they keep that in mind? Do they even care about that? And does talking to my financial advisor make me feel more knowledgeable or more overwhelmed? A good financial advisor should equip you. Obviously, they don't want to, you want someone that's going to be truthful with you about your situation, but you want someone that's going to leave you with hope and a strategy to accomplish your goals, not just someone that just dumps a lot of information on you and then makes you feel stressed and overwhelmed, right? And so it's always good just to ask yourself these questions about your current advisor. Now, here are some questions to ask specifically to your financial advisor that you're already working with. How is my current portfolio working towards our goals? And I think a good financial advisor would be upfront about that with you, maybe on an annual review. But if they're not, ask them, what's missing from my financial plan? Sometimes things don't get addressed, like beneficiaries. Do you have an updated will, power of attorneys? Have we ever done a budget before? Have we ever talked about the debt that I have? Are there ways to, work with my finances to lower my taxes, things like that? When should I rebalance my portfolio? Again, I think a good financial advisor would be proactive about that. Maybe there's a reason they're not, but asking about it, I think, is a good idea. Rebalancing, what that means is when you originally met with your advisor, you came up with certain percentages for different types of accounts. Naturally, over time, some things grow faster than others, and things get out of balance. And so you can move things around maybe once a year or so to rebalance them to make it an appropriate allocation for you. When should I readjust my investment strategy? There are different life stages, and adjusting every year isn't necessarily a good idea. The idea for most strategies is we're going to be working in this particular phase of life for a while. But then, if someone retires, if they move, if they have a spouse that passes away, if there's a health change, sometimes, there are different things that happen that cause a need to change investment strategy. How will my investment affect my taxes? Am I protecting my assets if the market drops? Is there any type of protection there, or am I completely at risk? And do you have all my current personal information? I think it's good for your financial advisor to at least have contact information of maybe if you have a power of attorney in your life, if you have a trust, the trustee, maybe your beneficiaries, if that's like your spouse or adult children. Because if there was a health issue or something and your advisor couldn't get a hold of you, it would be good to have a second or third follow-up contact person. All right, rounding the bend here. Okay, so that was just some information about finding a financial advisor, working with someone, some questions to ask. During the Q&A, we can talk more about that if you want. I was asked if we could talk about required minimum distributions for a minute. Just in case, I'm sure many of you already know what this is, but just in case you don't, if you have qualified accounts, so traditional IRAs or things like that, the IRS requires at a certain age, 72 and a half, to start taking money out, a certain percentage. And there's a calculation where based on how much money you have is, what they require you to take out. Even if you don't need to take the money out, they're like, too bad, you have to take it out. And the reason why they want you to take it out is so you can pay taxes on it. Well, some people are fortunate enough where they don't need to take it out at all, and they would like to they'd like to donate it. And so there is a strategy where if you're fortunate enough to, when it comes time to take out your required minimum distribution, you do it once a year, you can give that money away. And so if you have a required minimum distribution, whether it's a personal account or an inherited account, if you do not need the funds, you can donate it to a charity. And it's got to be a qualified charitable distribution. I believe it's a 501c3. but it's going to be a qualified, charitable organization, and any money up to $100,000 won't be taxed. So if you think, well, gee, I don't really need this money, I would rather see my favorite charity benefit from it, then that money, that charity will get the full amount. None of it will be taxed. And so that's a huge benefit to them. And so I always need to say this. I'm not a tax accountant. I mean, I know a fair amount about taxes, but I think a good financial team is having a good financial advisor and a good tax accountant. And so having, your tax accountant can help you figure that out, to make sure you've got the right paperwork, you keep track of records, those sorts of things. On the financial advisor side, your financial advisor should be able to do the calculations of your required minimum distribution for you, so you don't have to. There's calculators online. You can figure this out on your own if you want. But if you have a financial coach, a financial advisor, they should have the ability to calculate it for you, so you don't have to do that. And then they can actually, if you take out taxes, they can take out the taxes for you, or they can withhold the taxes if you're going to give it to a charity. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I covered a lot of this right here, right? Yeah. So a qualified 501c3 organization, you should make sure that that's their tax status that you give to. Up to $100,000 is not taxed. And then I think, and by the way, it has to be done by December 31st of any given year. You don't have until April 15th of the next year to do it. You got to do it within the calendar year if that's something you want to do. Okay, and then wrapping up, there was a question about ESG investments. So that's environmental, social, governance investments. And these are particular types of investments that have a focus on investing in companies that are focused on the environment. In other words, not polluting the environment or being proactive to clean up the environment. They're focused on social issues of the day. And make sure that they're not, that they're following laws, right? Like, sometimes you don't want to deal with companies that maybe produce weapons or things like that. And so it's becoming a more popular area to invest in, with social unrest and climate change and things like that. And so the question to ask is, do you offer ESG products, right? Environmental, social, governance products that meet certain criteria. And here's the two things I want to say about this. The first one is there are particular investments, like a mutual fund, let's say, that all they invest in are companies that meet a strict criteria for ESG. That's good because it's a good feeling. You're making a positive difference. You're working with companies, you're making a positive difference in the world. Sometimes the challenge is these investments haven't been around for very long, so they don't have a very long track record necessarily. And so you want a good return in your investment, but you want to do the right thing at the same time. And so sometimes it's hard to find that good mix to get good returns and be socially responsible. But there are more and more of those investments, so it's becoming easier over time. The second thing is there are specific products, specific investments that do that, but then there are companies that maybe they don't have a particular product, but they have a general philosophy. So in other words, they may not hold companies to a certain standard, a certain criteria to invest with them, but they communicate with the companies saying, hey, the consumer out there is interested in companies that are mindful of social issues and the environments and so on. And so the more you can show that in your company, the more interested we'd be investing in your company, because the consumer is interested in that. So in other words, there are certain products that have a very strict criteria, And then there are investment companies that are trying to steer the ship in that direction. It doesn't mean every company meets the criteria necessarily, so it's not a perfect system, but they are proactive in helping companies understand that this is what the consumer is looking for. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right there, and I think we're right at 12:44, so I want to leave some time for some Q&A. So I'll hand it back over to you, Ellie or Terry. Take it away.
I had a question about robo-advisors, these advisors, quote unquote, where you just provide information on your financial situation. As I understand it, a computer program just plugs all that information in and comes out with recommendations for you. What do you think of those, and would they be appropriate for seniors?
Sure. So again, yeah, robo-advisor is an advisor that's not a human being, right? You know, it's basically a computer program giving you advice on how to invest your money. When these came out, the talk of the town was this was going to replace financial advisors. The reality is that didn't happen. Very few people use them. They tend to be younger, just because a lot of people are on their phones and they're used to doing things online. The answer to your question, Ellie, is it's a matter of preference. It really depends on the person. I think for most senior citizens, I think most would be more comfortable working with a human being, because it's not just about finding the right investment. It's about understanding someone's situation. A robot's not going to know how you feel about your grandkids. They're not going to know how you feel about, maybe children in the neighborhood. They're not going to know how you feel about particular volunteer organizations you're a part of. And so they're not going to be able to offer suggestions or strategies to benefit that individual based on their desires or what's important to them. And so if you're comfortable and you've got a very simple thing you want to do, fine, use robo-advisors. But I think most people, probably not the way to go.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Lucy.
You went through your list of questions to ask a financial advisor, questions to ask your current financial advisor. How can we get those lists? Because they were very good. I couldn't write down all the questions that you were.
Yeah, I'm sharing this with Ellie and Terry, so they'll have a copy and they can get that out to you.
They'll email it. Is that right?
No, they'll be posted on the Hyde Park Village website.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Thank you.
Both the recording as well as the slides.
Great, thanks.
Also, Terry has a question.
Yeah, I had my hand up with the
Sure.
my question is regarding the financial advisors that work with banks. Can you get anything, information about them also on the broker check website?
Yes, if they have an investment license, it's regulated through FINRA. So Broker Check is a website also regulated by FINRA. So yes, they would be on there as well.
Thank you.
Terry, your question?
Yes. Are these the same, or what are the differences? A financial coach, agent, consultant, counselor, etc.
No, there's different terms. I use coach because it's just more friendly, relatable term than advisor necessarily. I mean, you could be a certified financial planner, which there's certain criteria you have to meet to do that. And so it's a good question. You can add, you could add this to the list of questions to ask, like what are your certifications? What are you licensed in, and what are you certified as? Now, I think, like, to give you an example, like a certified financial planner, typically they're part of an organization where everything is in-house. They're going to have their own tax advisors. They're going to have people that do certain stocks. They're going to have maybe work with a hedge fund group. So they typically go to places where they have their own people, and you are working with those people only. They tend to be expensive, and but that doesn't necessarily mean they're better at their job than someone who's not a CFP, certified financial planner. But it is good to ask those questions like, what are your certifications and what does that mean? So the short answer to your question, Terry, is they are different. Someone asked, touch on the difference between a Roth and traditional IRA. And so I think it was a direct message, so I'll cover that real quickly. So an IRA is an individual retirement agreement. It's if you're working, if you have income, you can put money away for retirement in an individual retirement agreement. And so the IRS allows you to put money in there. Depending on your age, you can put $6,000 a year, maybe $7,000 a year. And the idea is you get tax benefits. The government is encouraging you, please save for retirement. So again, you got to be working, you got to have an income, or you got to be married to someone who's working or got an income, and then you can put that money in the IRA. Now, what's the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA? A traditional, you put the money in, you get tax benefits today. You get a tax deduction today. So that's a good thing. Over time, when you retire and you take the money out, you pay taxes on it later. And, it's kind of bad, right? We don't want to pay taxes, right? And so that's on the back end. A Roth IRA is the reverse. The money we put in, we have to pay taxes on. So no tax advantages today, but it grows tax-free. And then when you take it out, you can take the money out tax-free. So depending on which one you use, you get tax advantages in the front end or the back end. They're both beneficial. It just depends on your situation. But again, either you or your spouse has to have some kind of income in order to contribute to them. Great question. What other questions? Any others?
Kathy Williams had 2 questions.
I see one of them says, should we be considering expanding your portfolios to include cryptocurrencies? Okay. So maybe you heard of Bitcoin and things like that. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are considered speculative. That doesn't mean anyone knows for sure that it's a good or bad investment. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. It's so new. And there's so many things coming down the pipeline. Maybe the government will regulate it, which could affect the value of it. How we interact with it, they're figuring it out. There's so many question marks. So a good general rule of thumb is don't invest in anything that you don't understand. If you can't explain it back to me, maybe you shouldn't be investing in. And so the question is like, well, I've heard people making a lot of money in cryptocurrencies, and that's true. Not most people, but some people, yes. And so, well, how can I, grow my money? Well, there's lots of other options, You don't have to be in cryptocurrencies to make money. You have lots of other options. And so if you're not familiar with it, if you're not comfortable with it, if you can't explain it to me, maybe it's not the best place to put your money.
Thank you. And also Kathy asked, did a law get passed requiring financial advisors to be fiduciaries? Wait, what is that noise? I don't know the technology of this, but the noise.
Ellie, we couldn't hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, but didn't hear Ellie's question.
Okay. The question was, did a law get passed requiring financial advisors to be fiduciaries?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yes. So it's complicated, but if you're handling someone's retirement account and you're, investment license, then you are a fiduciary, which means you are required to do what's in the best interest of the client. Again, I think that's kind of silly. We should always be doing what's in the best interest of the client. Unfortunately, they had to pass a law that said, hey, you have to do what's in the best interest of the client. Like, and most advisors are already doing what's in the best interest of the client. So, but yeah, I don't know the name of the law or the details of it, but the short answer is yes.
Thank you. Jerry had another question.
Yes. Thoughts on the effects of the war in Ukraine on financial investments here in the States?
So I think it's good to get a mix of opinions on this. When anyone asks me a specific question like, hey, what do you think about gold? What do you think about, what's going on in China? What do you think about the war in Ukraine? I'm like most people, I have opinions, but those opinions don't really affect the stock market or help you grow, your investments or reach your financial goals. And so there's a chart, unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me, but it shows the history of the stock market. And, it shows the stock market going up, and it shows magazine covers and newspaper headlines over the years of every war we've had, presidents resigning and being impeached, Black Mondays, terrorist attacks, war, just all these things. But the stock market keeps going like this. Now it goes up and down, right? And so the short term is a big question mark. People don't really know. Long term, I think we should all be very optimistic. And that's why you need to have a game plan, a strategy that understands there's going to be ups and downs in the short term, but it's taking advantage of the long term. The war in Ukraine, we certainly hope will be short term. I think everyone hopes that. Ultimately, it will be part of that long stretch of history, newspaper clippings and headlines, the war in Ukraine. And, if history continues, as the market always has, the market will continue to go up. Obviously, we've seen blips in the market's gone down. That's short term. And so just without getting into all the details of, of my opinions, most people are optimistic about the long term, but there's a lot of questions about the short term. And again, that's why you want to have a good strategy that can wade through the short terms, but take advantage of the long terms.
I'd like to make a comment, Josh. Yeah. I'm the person who asked about the IRAs, and I used to be a financial advisor. And I have to congratulate you on how well you covered all of the points you need to cover and did it in I think, a very succinct way.
Oh.
And you were very, you didn't push it one way or the other. So you did a great job.
Wow. Well, thank you. And from one financial coach to another, that means a lot. Thank you.
Yep. After 30, I was in it a little longer than you, 36 years. But anyway, right. You did a really good job of covering all the points you really need to know about.
Well, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I had a question on ESG investments. Can you hear me?
There's something, I'm not sure, there's an echo and it's really hard to hear you, Ellie.
We're getting a lot of feedback, Ellie, when you're talking, so it's hard to hear you.
Can you type it in the chat?
Yes, I'll put something in the chat then.
Okay. While she's typing, are there any other questions?
Anybody raising their hand? I did have a question, Josh. I actually am working with a financial advisor. When I was looking around, I found that there was big differences in terms of how much money you had to have to work with one.
Yeah.
Can you make any comments on that?
Yes. All right. So maybe Ellie, I don't know if you can mute yourself. There you go.
I muted her. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. So the question was, to work with certain financial advisors, some of them require a minimum. real quick, what's happening in our world, we are in a unique, just a unique time in history where it's called the wall of wealth. There is so much money that's moving today. It's literally billions and trillions of dollars of new money moving from 401ks and inheritances that no time have we ever seen in history before. And the reason is in the early 80s, they started 401ks. And so people started investing in 401ks, and now the baby boomers are retiring. And so there's so much money moving that investors have never seen this before, that and financial firms are now actually turning their noses up to small accounts. And a small account might be 50,000, 100,000. There are firms, if you have less than $250,000, they won't even talk to you. And I think that's unfortunate, but they can do that because there's so much money out there. They're just looking for the big fish. I'll just say this about myself. We don't have a minimum. I work with clients at all different stages of life with different amounts. I think if someone has a minimum, I think it's unfortunate. It tells me that they're not interested in growing your money. They're interested in taking over the money, you've accumulated it, and managing it. It's more work to help someone grow money than it is to manage it. And so if you're looking for someone to help manage and grow your money, maybe working with a company that has a minimum may not be the best fit for you.
Interesting.
I have a question, and there seems to be some problem. I wasn't able to put it in the chat. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear
Yeah,
you
now we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, this is about ESG funds. I know that they're very broad, covering all kinds of environmental, social, and governance issues. And my feeling is it's important to have mutual funds that are focusing specifically on clean energy and solar, wind, that kind of thing, because frankly, we wouldn't have the problems we're having now with the Russian gas if we had moved more quickly towards clean energy. And so I'm wondering, what do you think of such a very specialized fund? And how would you find such a fund that's focusing specifically on clean energy? And
Well, most investment firms offer ESG funds. And it's not they don't have a lot, but they at least offer it. And so the way you find it is you just ask your financial advisor, what type of ESG funds or investments do you offer? And if they're becoming more and more popular, so more and more firms are offering them, more and more mutual fund companies are offering them. So the way you find it is you just ask. And you just say, this is what's important to me. And so it just goes back to the questions. When you prepare to meet with someone, have a list of your goals. One of your goals can be, I want my investments to be with companies that are mindful of the environment and are working towards clean energy. Well, now that advisor knows what you're looking for, and he or she can tell you if they can help you reach that goal or not. It's really just a question. It's just a matter of just asking, do you offer it, and what does that look like?
thank you. By the way, on the qualified charitable distributions, I've done that, and I just want to mention the money has to be sent directly from your IRA to the organization you're giving it to. There's a form that you filled out saying where to send the check. So it doesn't work if you send it to you and then charity.
Good point. Thanks for sharing.
So it's,
Questions?
yeah.
I've done that too.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
looks like we're the question, are there last questions? We're now at 1:04, so just want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered before we wrap up the presentation and turn it over for our informal chat. Any
Now,
last?
I was just gonna piggyback on what Ellie said. You do have to make sure that the funds go directly to the charitable organization. It cannot come to you and you write a check to the organization. So,
Correct.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Any
Well-
last questions or comments?
I just want to just thank everyone, especially Ellie and Terry for inviting me back on. I enjoyed doing this, so I appreciate that. I know many of you are already working with some great people. I will throw my hat out in the ring. If you are open to a second opinion or looking for someone new, I do make house calls, or I can do a Zoom call, whatever you prefer, but keep me in mind in the future. And again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Well, and Josh, we want to thank you for 2 years in a row. You've provided us with valuable information and you have not done your sales pitch. So we really appreciate that you have been such an unbiased sharer of information. And so we thank you for coming back again this year and for following up from last year. So thank you.
All right. Well, I'll be happy back next year. Just let me know.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
All right,
Bye
bye-bye.
now. Have a good day.